You want to do something great, you gotta do it yourself. Top 9 worst final bosses. Why top 9? Is that just some hipster number you decided to use to be #original? Whatever, less for me to cover, I guess. The only worthwhile thing you'll be missing when we skip the intro is his explanation of why he's skipping the music. Basically, they're almost all good, and it'll hurt his arguments if he brings them up. Also, spoilers.
After the frustration I had when fighting DDD, Nightmare just pissed me off. Phase 1 is a shoot 'em up where you shoot the stars from the Star Rod and fire them at the Nightmare Ball. While dodging the stars, Nightmare throws at you. The problem is, not only do you have a time limit, but the fight is way too easy, even for a Kirby game. The only times I died in this phase were either due to the time limit or me playing hard mode.
So it's easy on easy mode. Imagine that.
Then you're doing it wrong.
Final bosses don't need to be harder than every other mandatory boss in order to be a good final boss. For something like Nightmare, it only needs to be more climatic. Granted, being too easy could be a little off-putting, but difficulty shouldn't be the only aspect when judging a final boss. Otherwise, it makes it look pretty shallow, especially if you're looking for difficulty in Kirby of all places. And no, I don't mean bosses outside modes that are meant to be harder either.
Phase 1 is pathetic. All you do is shoot his hands, then you shoot his face. The second form varies. If you fought him on the easy path, all you will get is a robot, and that one is very easy to take down.
Well, there has to be a reason why it's called the easy path.
Then there's his hard version. Andross can suck away so much health if you get caught, which may not be bad if it wasn't for the goddamn camera. This isn't an issue of the boss being difficult, it's the game betraying you.
You betrayed me, you're not good, you're just a chicken. Chip, 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 chip.
I was trying to keep away from Andross, but the camera kept betraying me, and I lost a ton of health. And may I remind you that if one of your wings breaks, you lose all your upgrades.
Have you ever tried putting space between yourself and Andross? You're in a huge area, Andross is slower than you, and you have a radar. The point I'm trying to get is that I'm not saying it's easy, I'm saying you're doing it wrong.
What's worse? Getting out of Venom. You have to fly away, and if you mess up, you die. And even the ending isn't satisfying on the hard difficulty. How on earth could Fox's father appear here, but not the rest of the game? It just doesn't make any sense.
Because it's not like Fox's father was a prisoner of Andross and thus could only get to Fox after Andross's death. What are you asking for, logic?
I may like this game, but this final boss sucked. Phase 1 involves you driving a boat while shooting your gun at Shepard. The problem with this is that it's weird controlling this because you have to drive the boat, shoot the gun, and turn the boat so you don't die.
Except until you get to the waterfall, you won't need to shoot your gun. All you need to worry about is driving, and even dying isn't that big of a deal since you get to respawn at the previous checkpoint. And when you get to the waterfall, guess what? You won't need to drive anymore, so you can shoot away. Call of Duty is not this much of a clusterfuck, Wave.
After falling off the waterfall, Phase 2 begins. You stumble around in a drunken state looking for Shepard, and when you find him, he grabs your knife and not only shoots you, but stabs you in the chest. Then, I believe Price fights Shepard for a bit, and you have to do a quick time event. Okay, is it really that hard just to pull out a knife?
Maybe. It's not like he was stabbed in the chest after, I don't know, falling down a waterfall and getting shot. You know, there are some people that are lucky enough to say that they've survived one of these happening to them, and you expect pulling out a knife from your already weakened body to be easy? Fucking standards, man!
No. That may be a pathetic boss, but it's not the one from Super Metroid. I will save my thoughts on Super Metroid for a future list, but this final boss left a lot to be desired. Phase 1 is a recreation of the original final boss, but this time you have much stronger weapons, so this phase is actually worse than the NES version.
Easier, yeah, but worse? At least the boss doesn't end on that phase.
Here's why. Mother Brain is cheap. She throws bombs that do a ton of damage, nova beams, and an attack from her brain that takes away all your health if you're not careful. Seriously, you could die before the scripted event takes place. It's possible to do.
Her nova beams can't fire if you keep on moving, her bombs are avoidable by jumping, and her brain beam is the scripted event, and that only kills you if you have less than 3 energy tanks left. Being able to die is not a flaw, especially if you have to try in order to lose. Or not try at all, your choice.
Then, the baby Metroid comes in and zaps away all of Mother Brain's energy to give you. Well, thanks, baby Metroid. Bullshit! You were sapped away by the Metroid! Okay, game. Mind explaining to me how everyone else that gets sapped by the baby Metroid turns to dust, but Mother Brain conveniently doesn't?
Because unlike every other living organism on that planet, Mother Brain was a supercomputer, and even then, it still lost a fuck ton of energy when the baby Metroid attacked it.
So on top of the first phase being more pathetic than the NES final boss, the second phase being both BS cheap and more pathetic, we have to escape the planet as well. Screw this shit, the planet can get blown up by Frieza for all I care, because this boss fight not only creates a plot hole, but it saps away any enjoyment I had with this. Screw this game. I will save my thoughts on Super Metroid for a future list.
Ugh, spoilers! Skipping number 5, since I haven't played that game, nor do I care enough to actually try and argue against any of his points. Same goes to his number 4, except for 2 things. 1, I question why you still keep some of the cutscenes in from the game when you could just as easily sum these scenes up in about 5 seconds or so. Unless you're leaving for something big, but you really weren't. The second...
How ironic. My most hated character in video games is also a shitty final boss.
That's not how irony works. Situational irony, which is the form of irony I'm assuming you're trying to use, is supposed to be the opposite of what we should expect. It would work more like how ironic that Black Doom, my least favorite video game character, is actually a good boss, or how ironic that Black Doom, one of my favorite Sonic characters, is a shitty boss. I know you wouldn't say either of these things about Black Doom, and frankly no one should either, but understand that there's more to words than just saying them. I also skipped most of number 3. Oh, except for this part.
I know some people like to make fun of Mega Man X6, which is fine, they have a right to their opinion. But you know what? To X6's credit, its final boss was at least challenging.
You know, I've shit-talked your jokes on several occasions now, but I'll give credit where credit is due. That was actually pretty funny. Gotta hand it to you, Wave. You can be really funny when you want to be, and this is probably your best joke yet. Better than what other people have been trying to do. Keep up the good work. Wait, you were serious?
This thing was hyped up as the Desostroya of Pokémon, a being of negative emotions that would destroy the world if the player did nothing. But when I fought the Bitter Cold, this thing couldn't destroy an Easter egg. Hell, Kyurem was more of a final boss than this thing, but I digress. You can attack him all you want for Phase 1, but he will take no damage until a certain cutscene. But he certainly can attack you, and will kill you if you have no Reviver Seeds. He can even confuse you with his attacks, making it harder to lay a hit on this guy. And did I mention he can lower your stats as well? It's not challenging or an issue of fairness, it's freaking cheap. Let me ask you a question to those that have played the other games, and are willing to defend the Bitter Cold. Did Primal Dialga confuse you and lower your stats? No. He may have had an annoying attack, but he had a recharge time.
Said attack could hit you from anywhere in the room and could potentially one-shot you, meaning that if you came with no Reviver Seeds, you would have to restart the previous 10 floors. As someone who likes the Primal Dialga fight more than the Bitter Cold fight, even I admit the Primal Dialga fight is cheaper.
Did Rayquaza lower your stats and confuse you? No, I didn't think so. So why should the Bitter Cold get that excuse?
Because it's very possible to die against Rayquaza and Dialga thanks to their strong attack stats and the resistances to your common stab moves. Plus, dying means you have to tread through about 10 more floors to re-challenge them. With the Bitter Cold, your checkpoint is right in front of it, and it has no typing that can hinder you.
even if you die, guess what happens? Bitter Cold's health doesn't refill. You heard me. I didn't stutter. His health doesn't refill. And this is the ultimate boss of the game. The big bad. Everything hyped up. The reason they didn't make Kyurem the final boss, despite the fact that dragons have always been the final boss of games. The snowflake is the final boss.
Rayquaza has dominance over the ozone layer and Dialga over time. They were final bosses for reasons other than being dragons. And its health not refilling is actually because of the game's plot. You said it yourself, it's fueled by negative emotions. With the hope everyone has in you, you obtain the ability to confront it, eventually breaking its shell. It doesn't regenerate health because not only is it just a collection of negativity that lacks the tissue needed to heal, but you literally get up right in front of it. That's another issue with your list. To an extent, I can understand not talking about music, but context, especially in cases like the Bitter Cold, is almost essential. Context explains why Fox's father can only speak after Andros' death, or why Mother Brain wasn't turned to dust by the baby Metroid, or why he couldn't pull out the fucking knife. Actually, you do mention context, but only when it helps call boss shit, and even then that's more luck considering what you've argued with. The Bitter Cold is a fight that relies almost entirely on how climactic it is. Does that make it a good boss? Well, I'll leave that entirely up to you. But identify that some fights are meant to be climactic and not challenging. That's your problem with the Bitter Cold, and frankly, most of your list. You judge them solely on challenge value.
The worst final boss I have ever fought is Ganon from Ocarina of Time. I hold no regrets. I may like this game, but this final boss is worse than any previous entry on this list.
Wait, hold up. The number one on your top 9 worst final boss list you think is worse than the previous entries. We're done here. Clearly my mind has been blown by this stunning revelation.
And then the battle begins. Phase 1 has Ganon only doing 2 things after Falcon punching the ground. Shoot a Spirit Bomb knockoff.
Because if it's a projectile, it's obviously a knockoff of Dragon Ball Z.
Kind of like the Phantom Ganon boss in the Forest Temple. Except, instead of paintings to go through, you can hit him out in the open. The only time I took damage was because of the camera betraying me.
Everybody betrayed me. I fed up with this world.
In fact, this boss is so poorly programmed, he can be beaten with a bottle. A freaking bottle can stop the king of evil.
Bad programming would imply that this was a glitch, something that wasn't supposed to be there. This was intentional. If anything, this is just a nod to how, in A Link to the Past, you could use a bucket in it to be agony. Also, look at the fishing pole, look at the fish bowl, look at the fish slash.
After he's fallen and can't get up, Phase 2 begins. All you do is get out of the castle with Zelda. It takes more time than necessary, and the Stalfos fight can suck their own skullcocks. And what was the point of the Re-Dead on the bridge, aside from saying they exist?
To slow you down in that atmosphere, or just because to piss you off.
Even when you get the Master Sword back. Which makes the light arrows, which was supposed to be one of the ultimate weapons to stopping Ganon, worthless in this fight. Seriously though, don't use the light arrows, it's not worth it since you can easily roll under him and he's slow turning around.
The light arrows provide the longest stun when you attack Ganon's face with them. This gives you the safest route with which you can reach Ganon's tail. And the bullshit, the light arrows were required to be Ganondorf. Yeah, the battle could reflect his attack, but you then needed to capitalize on that by striking him with a light arrow. It's not required in the final phase of the boss fight, but it's ultimately required in a phase of the boss fight.
Why does Zelda need to send Link back in time for his childhood? He knows the details of the future, and with no way to go back, she essentially created a time paradox with this.
Zelda sent Link back not just so he could have a childhood, but to tell the king of Ganondorf's treachery, with the Triforce of Courage as proof.
Now, it's rumored that Ganon was killed in this new past, but that would ruin the future entirely with this alteration, making it more confusing than Nintendo's official timeline. In In fact, you could say that the 7 year skip would never occur, which would make the Master Sword pointless, which might even erase it, and all this shit, which makes Wind Waker impossible to exist now.
Even if Ganon was killed, thanks to Demise's curse from Skyward Sword, he would still be revived. However, according to the official timeline, Ganondorf was only arrested, which is in line with Twilight Princess.
By sending him back to where Link first met Zelda, how would the door be open? That door needs all 3 stones and the ocarina, and at that point, Link only had 1 of the stones. Also, doesn't that mean Ganon would take over the castle early? He was waiting for Link to open the door after all.
No, because at the point Zelda sent Link back to, the Sacred Realm wasn't open, and since that was the source of the time travel, the Temple of Time was unaffected, so he would have all 3 stones. Would you lose your items when you time traveled in Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Time, Darkness, and Sky? Or the links on the Epic, or the Epic itself, in Chrono Trigger? No. Ultimately, it's not a time paradox. A time paradox means there's only one timeline, and Zelda, after Ocarina of Time, has 3. One where Ganondorf is captured and Link can live his life as a child, one where Ganondorf conquers Hyrule again because Link wasn't there to save the day, and one where Link dies. I'm actually kind of surprised you didn't complain about how the Fallen Hero timeline shouldn't exist because you need to beat Ganon in order to beat the game and not lose to Ganon. And I'm ending the video here. The biggest issue we've had lies in how he judges most of them through only difficulty. He'll bring up story or context occasionally, only to show that he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. Because he's confused and can't be bothered to ask someone about it, he'll just say it sucks. While it's not the stupidest video of waves I've covered, does that automatically make it good? Do I even have to answer that for you? Also, happy birthday, Hobbs!